Part 1. The year my landlord stole my deposit was the same year everything else in my life felt like it was held together with duct tape. I was 34, living in a mid-sized Midwest city, not quite Chicago, more like one of those up-and-coming places people name drop on LinkedIn. I'd just come off a messy breakup, I'd switched jobs twice in 18 months, and my savings account looked like a joke. On paper, I was a grown adult. In reality, I was one medical bill away from moving back in with my parents. The apartment I was renting was in a 4-unit brick building on a tree-lined street. Nothing fancy, creaky floors, ancient radiators that hissed like they were complaining, windows that whistled in the winter. But it was mine. My little one-bedroom on the second floor with a tiny balcony that faced a maple tree. In the fall, the whole world outside my window turned orange and gold. I remember thinking the first week I moved in, I can rebuild from here. I'd found the listing on Craigslist. Back then, that alone should have been a red flag, but I was desperate. The ad said, spacious 1BR, great neighborhood, quiet building, responsive landlord. It also said $1,500 security deposit, fully refundable. I had to swallow hard when I saw that number. $1,500 was more than a number to me. It was 2 months of scrimping on groceries. It was selling my TV. It was going without a car and taking the bus through a Midwestern winter. When I met the landlord, he barely looked at me, just at my pay stubs. His name was Greg, mid-50s, always in some kind of fleece vest over a collared shirt like a bargain bin tech bro. He shook my hand like he was doing me a favor. The whole lease signing took maybe 10 minutes at a cafe. "You understand," he said, tapping the page about the deposit, "we're really strict on damages. We run a professional property, no funny business on move-out." I remember nodding a little too eagerly. That was one of my flaws then. I wanted people to think I was easy, low maintenance. I hated conflict. So I sat there and said, "Yeah, of course, I totally get it," even though my stomach twisted. He slid the keys across the table. "And hey, just text if something's urgent. Otherwise, email." His tone made urgent sound like a personal weakness. The first month, I tried to be the perfect tenant. I took my shoes off by the door so I wouldn't mark the floors. I scrubbed the sink until the stainless steel actually looked like stainless steel. I lined the cabinets with cheap dollar store contact paper so my dishes wouldn't clink against the wood. I remember thinking, almost superstitiously, if I take care of this place, it'll take care of me. But little things started to show. The first time I noticed the bathroom ceiling bubbling, it was a faint discoloration, a water stain the size of a quarter. I took a picture like a responsible adult and emailed Greg. "Hey Greg, just wanted to give you a heads up. Looks like there might be a small leak in the bathroom ceiling. There's a stain forming, not urgent, just wanted it on your radar." He didn't respond for 3 days. When he did, it wasn't an answer, just, "Got it, we'll check next time I'm there." No thanks, no I'll schedule someone. Just a vague promise from a man who was probably nowhere near the building. 3 weeks later, the stain had spread like a continent. I sent another email. This time I attached 2 photos, circled the area, and politely mentioned I was worried about mold. He replied the same night, but not with what I expected. "Please refrain from sending so many emails," he wrote. "We handle maintenance on a schedule. Minor cosmetic issues are not emergency work orders." Cosmetic. The ceiling was starting to peel. Tiny paint flakes landed in my sink every morning like snow. Still, I shut up. That was my pattern. I told myself I didn't want to be that tenant, the nagging one. I told myself I could live with it. Then the heat went out in January. It was a Tuesday night, single-degree temps outside, and the radiators in my place went silent. I checked the thermostat, still set to 70. Checked the breaker, fine. I could see my breath in the kitchen. I texted Greg this time because his lease said text for emergencies. "Hey Greg, no heat in my unit. Check the thermostat and breaker. It's 8 degrees outside. Can you send someone?" No response. I paced my living room in 2 pairs of socks and a hoodie, hugging my arms around myself, watching my own breath puff in the air. An hour passed. Then 2. I texted again. "Just following up on the heat, it's getting pretty cold in here." Another hour. Finally, around midnight, he answered. "Can't do anything till morning. Use a space heater if you have one." I didn't. I grabbed every blanket I owned, slept in 3 layers, and woke up with a sore throat and a headache. When the plumber finally came, he shook his head and muttered, "Boiler-'s been ignored for years. Landlord's cheap. You're not the first one freezing." That was another red flag. The way everyone who worked on the building seemed to already know Greg's name, and not in a good way. There were dozens of little things after that. The front door lock stuck so badly that sometimes I had to shoulder slam the door like I was breaking in. The hallway light bulb burned out and stayed that way for weeks, turning the staircase into a dark cave. When my upstairs neighbor's tub overflowed, water dripped directly into my kitchen, right over the stove. I filmed that one drips hitting the stovetop and sent Greg a video. His answer: "Please do not cook when there is water coming through the ceiling. That's a hazard. I'll get to it next week." No, sorry, no, this shouldn't be happening. Just a note that implied the hazard was my fault. Here's the part that still embarrasses me. I made excuses for him. I told friends he's just busy, or at least the rent's not insane. I paid on time every time. I shoveled the front steps when it snowed and cleared leaves from the shared walkway because nobody else did. I treated that building like it was mine because I wanted stability so badly. 2 years in, my life started to change. I landed a better job, project manager at a small tech company downtown. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was steady enough that I could breathe. I opened a separate savings account that wasn't constantly at zero. On weekends, I walked past nicer apartment buildings and let myself think, maybe next year. Then my company announced we were moving offices farther out in a business park that made my bus commute absurd. At the same time, my friend Lisa told me about a place closer to the new office with in-unit laundry and a landlord who actually responded to texts. The rent was a bit higher, but with my new job, it was doable, so I gave notice. I sent Greg a polite, formal email 60 days out. Hi Greg, I wanted to let you know I'll be moving out at the end of my lease on June 30th. Please let me know what the move-out inspection process looks like and how to schedule it. Thanks, my name. He responded 6 days later with one line, noted, standard move-out, read your lease. I pulled out the lease. The move-out section said I had to leave the unit, in substantially the same condition as move-in, reasonable wear and tear accepted. It also said my $1,500 security deposit would be returned within 30 days subject to deductions for cleaning and damages. I decided right then that he was not getting one extra penny from me. I cleaned that place like I was prepping it for a real estate magazine shoot. I patched nail holes with spackle, sanded them, and painted over them with the exact off-white shade he'd used. I took a chip to Home Depot to match it. I scrubbed the oven until it looked almost new. I wiped baseboards, dusted fan blades, washed windows inside and out. Lisa came over the night before my move out and laughed at me on her way out of the bathroom. Dude, nobody cleans like this when they rent. Relax, you're fine. I shook my head, hands deep in a bucket of soapy water. He's the kind of guy who'll keep my deposit over a scuff on the floor. I'm not giving him a single excuse. And honestly, when I was done, the place looked better than the day I moved in. The bathroom ceiling had eventually been patched and painted. The kitchen counters were spotless. Even the ancient radiators gleamed as much as ancient radiators can. I emailed Greg to schedule a move-out walkthrough. He declined. Don't need a walkthrough. Leave the keys in the unit. We'll inspect after. That little line, "we'll inspect after," hit me wrong. I'd read enough horror stories online about landlords inventing damages when tenants weren't there to contest it. But the lease didn't say he had to do a joint inspection. And I was already locked into my move-out date, my new lease starting the next day, so I took photos, hundreds of them, every room, every corner. I did wide shots, then close-ups, date stamped. I took video too, panning slowly through the place while describing what I was seeing. This is the living room. No stains on the carpet, walls are patched and painted. This is the bathroom, this is the kitchen floor, no burns or cracks. It felt paranoid and slightly ridiculous, but I did it anyway, just in case. On June 30th, I did one last sweep, left the keys on the kitchen counter, and closed the door behind me. I stood in the hallway for a second, hand on the doorknob, and felt this weird mix of sadness and relief. That apartment had seen me at my lowest, post-breakup, half-broke, eating ramen over the sink. It also saw me slowly pull myself together. Walking down those dim stairs with my last box tucked under my arm, I remember thinking, okay, on to better things. For about 3 weeks, I was so wrapped up in settling into the new place and the new commute that I almost forgot about the deposit. I'd moved into an apartment with a dishwasher and laundry in the unit. The landlord, a woman named Maria, answered texts within an hour and fixed a squeaky cabinet door the same week I mentioned it. It felt like I'd stepped into a different universe. Then one night I was paying bills and realized it had been 24 days since my move out. My bank account was still missing $1,500. I checked my email, thinking maybe Greg had asked for my forwarding address or said something about mailing a check. Nothing, no messages since read your lease. So I sent a quick, polite nudge. Hi Greg, hope you're well, just checking in about the return of my security deposit from old address. My move-out date was June 30th, so I believe we're within the 30-day window. Please let me know when I should expect it. Thanks, my name, he replied faster than he ever had about maintenance. Deposit will not be returned, see attached. My stomach dropped. Attached was a PDF 3 pages long. The first page was a move-out inspection report, with my unit number at the top and a checklist below. Nearly every box was ticked under damaged/requires repair. The second page was a list of charges. Carpet replacement, excessive stains and pet odor, $975, full unit repaint due to marks, holes, discoloration, $1,100 professional deep cleaning appliances, bathroom, kitchen, $350, ceiling repair from water damage not reported, $800 total, $3,225 at the bottom in neat little print. Security deposit of $1,500 applied. Remaining balance of $1,725 due within 14 days. I read it twice before it fully sank in. Not only was he keeping my entire deposit, he was claiming I owed him money. My hands started to shake. I scrolled down. The third page was a set of photos, blurry, poorly lit images of what? Some stains on a carpet I'd never seen before. A wall with a giant fist-sized hole in it in the living room. A bathroom ceiling that looked like a war zone, chunks of plaster missing. None of it looked like my apartment. The carpet in my place had been a gray-beige low pile that hid everything. The carpet in the photo was shaggy and stained. The walls in my living room had a very specific radiator pipe running along the baseboard. The wall in the photo didn't. Even the bathroom tiles were wrong. He'd either mixed up units or he was straight up lying. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I opened my photo folder and clicked through my own move-out pictures. Clean carpet, smooth walls, intact ceilings. Side by side, the comparison was laughable. I fired off a response, heart pounding. Hi Greg, I just reviewed your inspection report and the photos you sent. These are not photos of my unit. The carpet, walls, and bathroom in the pictures don't match my apartment. I have date-stamped photos and video from my move-out that show the unit in good condition with no major damage. Please review your records. I expect my full deposit of $1,500 to be returned as required by law. My name. His reply came 10 minutes later. Per the lease, management's inspection is final. You left the unit in poor condition. We will not be returning your deposit. Any further communication on this matter should be directed to our legal department. There was no legal department. Greg owned 4 buildings tops, but he knew something I didn't fully believe yet. Most tenants don't have the time, money, or energy to fight, especially over a deposit, even a big one. They grumble, they vent to friends, they maybe leave a nasty review online, and they move on. I stared at his email, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. $1,500, 2 years of freezing nights and leaky ceilings and sweeping that hallway because he never hired anyone. 2 years of being told cosmetic and read your lease. And now he had the nerve to act like I'd trashed his property. I closed my laptop gently because if I didn't, I was going to slam it. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about buying a building or making him pay. I was just a tired, underpaid 30-something who'd been kicked one more time while I was trying to stand up. But that email, that smug little line about management's inspection is final, burned itself into my memory. I didn't know it then, but 4 years later, I'd be the one deciding whether Greg's rent check was approved or returned to sender. Part 2, the anger hit me first. I read Greg's management's inspection is final, email 3 times in a row, my vision going a little blurry at the edges. $1,500 wasn't just a number on a page. It was every night I'd stayed in instead of going out, every time I'd said no to a trip or a concert or a dinner, every extra hour I'd worked to get ahead. And now some smug guy in a fleece vest was telling me too bad, so sad, like he'd dropped a paperclip, not kept my entire savings buffer. I opened the PDF again, scrolling through the bogus charges. Carpet replacement, excessive stains, and pet odor. I'd never had a pet there, the lease didn't even allow them. Full unit repaint due to marks, holes, discoloration. I'd patched and painted every nail hole like a neurotic, ceiling repair from water damage not reported. I literally had a thread of emails about that leak going back a year with photos. My phone buzzed with a text from my bank, low balance alert, perfect timing. I did the math in my head and felt my chest tight. I had enough in checking to cover rent at the new place, utilities, and maybe a small emergency. That deposit was supposed to refill the oh crap fund. Without it, I was back to living on the edge. 1 flat tire, 1 medical copay, 1 layoff, and I'd be done. I closed my laptop and just sat there on my brand new couch in my brand new living room, staring at nothing. The new apartment was nicer in every way, clean carpet, working appliances, a landlord who actually answered texts, but right then all I could see was the hole in my finances. I called my friend Lisa. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, new place guy, how's the bougie dishwasher? He stole my deposit, I said, skipping hello. What, who? Greg, old landlord. He sent this inspection report and some random photos from God knows where, and now he's saying not only do I not get my deposit back, but I owe him more money. There was a beat of silence, then text me the email. I forwarded it and sat there, chewing my thumbnail while she read. Okay, she said finally. First of all, this is BS. Those pictures aren't even your place. Second, you have your own photos, right? Hundreds, I said. Video too. Good, then you fight him. I let out a humorless laugh. How he already hit me with per the lease, management's inspection is final. Yeah, well, per the law, you can take him to small claims, at least threaten it. Landlords pull this crap because people roll over. I don't exactly have stacks of cash for a lawyer. You don't need one for small claims. Google it or at least send a scary letter. After we hung up, I did what every modern adult does when they don't understand something. I Googled. How to get your security deposit back, small claims. Landlord kept deposit, fake damages. Tenant rights security deposit, Midwest. I ended up on tenant forums, legal aid sites, and a few plain English guides about small claims court. Over and over I saw the same thing: document everything, send a demand letter, give them a deadline, then sue if you have to. I had the documentation. That part, at least, I'd done right. I dug out my old lease and read the section on the deposit again, this time as if it were evidence instead of just fine print. It said he had 30 days to return it with an itemized list of deductions. It didn't say his word was final. State law pages I found said that if a landlord kept a deposit in bad faith, tenants might be entitled to extra damages. Some states even allowed double or triple the amount withheld. It was the first tiny crack in the feeling of total helplessness. Okay, I thought maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe he's actually in the wrong, so I wrote a real email this time. No more hope you're well. Subject: formal demand for return of security deposit, old address unit. I laid it out like the internet told me to. Date I moved in. Amount of the deposit. Date I moved out. Statement that the unit was left in good condition with normal wear and tear only. Mention of my photos and videos. Note that the photos he sent clearly weren't my unit. Citation of state law that required timely, accurate itemization of deductions. A clear demand: full $1,500 deposit returned within 10 business days or I'd file in small claims court. I tried to write it like someone who wasn't still in sweatpants and a t-shirt, heart pounding. When I hit send, my hands were clammy. It felt like standing up to a boss or a teacher, like I was breaking some unwritten rule about being nice. He replied the next day: "We disagree with your characterization. The inspection report and photographs are accurate. You are welcome to pursue legal action. We are fully compliant with the lease and state law." That was it. No addressing the wrong photos, no mention of the leak he'd ignored, just a corporate shrug in email form. I printed the emails, printed my photos. Filled a cheap folder from the dollar store with every document related to that apartment. The lease, my rent receipts, the maintenance emails about the bathroom ceiling and the heat, Greg's one-line responses. Then I began looking up how to file in small claims. Filing fee $60, service fee to have him served, more, time off work to go to court. At least half a day, maybe more depending on how backed up the docket was. $60 doesn't sound like much. At that point in my life, it was petrol for 2 weeks. It was my share of groceries. It was the difference between carrying a credit card balance and not. I sat at my kitchen table, pen poised over the plaintiff line on the form, and did the mental calculus poor people do all the time. How much is my pride worth and can I afford it? I talked it over with my mom on the phone. "Oh honey," she said, "you know I think he's a crook, but court is stressful. They might not even rule in your favor. Is this something you can let go?" I heard the worry under her words, the fear of me being humiliated in a courtroom or spending money I didn't have on a fight I couldn't win. My brother was blunter. "If you can stomach it, take him to court and make his life annoying for a day," he said. "But if you're gonna lose sleep over it, just consider it an expensive lesson and move on." I wish I could say I was some fearless, righteous warrior of tenant rights. I was. I was a tired guy with new job anxiety and a budget that squeaked when it turned corners. I went as far as drafting the claim. Name, address, amount demanded, brief explanation. Landlord wrongfully withheld full security deposit despite unit being left in good condition. Provided falsified photos that do not match unit. I even called the clerk to make sure I was using the right form. But every time I pictured myself standing in front of a judge, facing Greg in person, my throat tightened. I imagined him rolling his eyes, telling the court about entitled tenants and hidden damages, spinning the story just enough to make me look like the problem. After a week of circling the decision like a dog circling a bed, I did nothing. That's the part that's hard to admit. Not the fact that I got scammed, but the fact that I let myself be intimidated out of fighting back. Life, as it tends to do, didn't pause to let me process it either. At work, things were shaky. The company that had felt stable in the interview started showing its cracks. Layoffs in another department, random closed-door meetings, my manager suddenly talking a lot about runway and burn rate in our one-on-ones. Every time my email dinged, I half expected a calendar invite titled "Quick Chat with HR." At home, I was trying to make something real with Jenna, the woman I'd been seeing casually for a while. She was 32, smart, hilarious, and more financially together than I'd ever been. She had a 401k and knew what an index fund was without Googling it. When I told her about the deposit mess over takeout one night, she frowned. "Did you sign that lease before or after you read it?" she asked gently. "Before," I admitted. "I skimmed it, but yeah, before," she winced. "We gotta fix that habit." She wasn't judging exactly, but the truth stung. It wasn't just that Greg had screwed me. It was that I'd walked into the agreement trusting that standard lease meant fair lease, and I'd treated every red flag afterward like an inconvenience, not a warning. In the weeks that followed, the deposit saga turned from sharp pain to a dull ache. I'd think about it when I checked my account balance and saw how close to zero it was. I'd think about it when I saw Greg's building on my old bus route, its brick facade looking smug and untouched by my struggle. I did little things that looked like moving on. I blocked his number so I wouldn't see any random future texts. I deleted the folder named Old Apartment Legal from my desktop and moved the physical folder to the back of a drawer. I told myself, you're in a better place now, focus on that. But anger has a way of seeping into other things. I became cautious to the point of paranoia about money. Jenna and I fought about it more than once. We can afford dinner out, she'd say. It's one night. Yeah, and then my tire blows and I'm screwed, I'd snap back, harsher than she deserved. Eventually, that tension bled into everything. It wasn't the only reason we broke up, but it didn't help. One night after another argument about whether I should help pay for a weekend trip, she sighed and said, "You're still living in that old apartment in your head. With that landlord, you don't trust anything." When we split, I told people it was mutual. The truth was, she wasn't wrong. One particularly bad night, after a rough week at work and a rent payment that left me with less than $200 in my account, I opened my email and reread Greg's message. The one where he told me his inspection was final and I could pursue legal action if I wanted. I opened my photo folder, clicked through the clean rooms, the shiny counters, the intact ceiling, then opened his PDF again, stared at the stained carpet and busted walls that weren't mine. For the first time, instead of just seeing red, I noticed something else in the background of one of his photos, a radiator that looked different than mine, the kind you see in older, unrenovated units. And the baseboard in the picture had a crack where mine had been smooth. He'd either used photos from another tenant's unit to pad his evidence, or he genuinely couldn't tell his own apartments apart. I whispered to myself, "You're sloppy, Greg." And for some reason, that thought didn't make me feel powerless. It made me feel curious. I started reading more, not just tenant forums, but articles about landlords who'd been sued successfully, stories of renters who'd gotten double their deposit back because the landlord messed up on the paperwork or knowingly lied. Some states put the burden of proof on the landlord. Some allowed punitive damages for bad faith. Mostly, it made me realize something painful and important. I had walked into that lease ignorant and trusting, and I'd paid for it. Literally. Ignorance wasn't a moral failing, but it had consequences. One night, sitting on my balcony in the new place, watching cars glide past under the streetlights, I said it out loud like a promise to myself. I am never going to be in this position again. Not I'll get my $1,500 back, because by then I'd accepted that ship had sailed. The statute of limitations on small claims would run out eventually. Greg would keep the money. He'd probably keep doing the same thing to other tenants, but I could change the part of the equation that was me. I could learn how leases really worked. I could understand my rights. I could stop assuming people in fleece vests and clipped emails knew more than I did just because they acted like they did. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet, ashamed promise made on a scratchy balcony chair with my bank account nearly empty was the seed, not of revenge exactly, of something bigger. Because the next time a landlord decided my money was his by right, he was going to find me standing on the other side of the table. Part 3. By the time 2 years had passed, the email from Greg wasn't something I thought about every day, but it was still there, like an old scar you forget about until you bump it on a doorframe. Life didn't magically get easier after the deposit fiasco. It just shifted. My new job in project management held, but it wasn't exactly a dream. We were a small tech company building software for logistics, nothing sexy, just dashboards and integrations for warehouses and trucking fleets. The kind of thing that makes venture capitalists nod approvingly and puts normal people to sleep. The first year I kept my head down. I learned the tools, got decent performance reviews, and quietly hoarded every dollar I could. I brought my lunch most days. I said no to trips. I bought clothes on sale and told myself I was minimalist, not just broke. Somewhere in the middle of that grind, my anger toward Greg changed flavor. At first, it had been hot and wild, fantasies of confronting him in a courtroom, of him being humiliated, of a judge slamming a gavel and ordering him to pay double my deposit. But those daydreams never went anywhere. They didn't pay bills, they didn't build savings. Slowly, that anger cooled into something else, a kind of determination with teeth. Every time I clicked transfer on payday and moved a small amount into savings, I'd think, this is my money, not his. Every time I turned down an impulse purchase, I'd remember the way he'd written, "We are fully compliant with the lease and state law," and feel a quiet, stubborn refusal rise up in me. You got me once, I'd think, never again. The shift from "I want payback" to "I want out of this entire dynamic" was subtle, but it changed the path I was on. It started with a podcast, actually. I was stuck in traffic one morning on the way to the new office park, inching past endless beige buildings with logos I didn't recognize when Jenna's voice floated into my memory. "We gotta fix that habit." She meant my habit of signing things without reading them, trusting people who presented themselves as professional. Out of boredom, I typed "Money Podcast Beginner" into Spotify. I hit play on the first one that didn't sound too scammy. The host was a guy my age with a regular voice, not a slick finance bro, not a shouting guru. He talked about basic stuff, emergency funds, credit scores, index funds. Then he said something that lodged under my skin. Every dollar you keep is a vote for your future self. Every dollar you give away because you didn't know better is a vote for somebody else. It wasn't profound exactly, but it hit me at the right moment. I started listening every commute. At first it was just noise over the hum of the car. Then I started taking notes, actual notes in the Notes app on my phone when I parked. 3-6 months expenses emergency fund. 401k match equals free money. Landlords and banks aren't your parents, read everything. The more I learned, the uglier Greg's behavior looked in context. Keeping my deposit wasn't just a jerk move. It was part of a whole system where people who knew more about money, contracts, and property used that knowledge to squeeze people who didn't. And I'd been firmly in the second group. One afternoon over stale coffee in the break room, I mentioned the deposit story to a coworker named Marcus. We'd been put on the same project and bonded over our mutual disdain for disruption buzzwords. He winced. Man, same. My first landlord in the city did that to me too, said the smell of cooking damaged the walls. Like what? I boiled rice, not sulfur. We laughed, but there was an edge to it. He went on, dude, I actually took him to small claims. 1-2, judge looked at the pictures and went, this is normal wear and tear. Landlord folded fast once he realized I'd shown up with receipts. I stared at him. You actually did it? Yeah. Took a day off work, printed everything, stood there sweating in front of the judge, but I got my money back. I felt a weird mix of admiration and regret, like watching someone complete a level in a game you rage quit years ago. What made you go through with it? I asked. He shrugged. I was pissed, and I did the math, filing fee versus deposit. Plus, I wanted him to think twice next time. Even if I'd lost, he'd have had to put on pants and show up. That's something. I tried to picture Greg standing under fluorescent lights, clutching his fake inspection report while a judge asked him why his photos didn't match the unit. The image was satisfying and then just as quickly irrelevant. I couldn't go back in time, but I could go forward differently. Around that time, I started spending more lunches with a guy from the sales team named Aaron. Aaron was one of those people who always seemed to have something else going on. Old software by day, but he talked casually about my duplex or the fourplex I'm looking at. At first I assumed he was just bragging, but one day when we ended up at the same table, I asked outright, "So you actually own rental properties?" I said, poking at my sad Tupperware leftovers. "Yeah," he said, "got my first place 5 years ago, house hacked a duplex, lived in one unit, rented the other, best thing I ever did." "Isn't being a landlord stressful?" I asked. I thought of frozen radiators, ignored leaks, and tenants sending emails into the void. Aaron smiled. "It can be if you do it like a slumlord, but if you screen tenants, keep up the place, and actually answer your phone, not as bad as you'd think. Plus, the mortgage gets paid down by someone else." He spoke about it like he was explaining how he brewed coffee in the morning, not glamorous, just normal. I hesitated, then blurted, "My last landlord stole my deposit." Like full-on fake damages. I didn't fight it and I still feel sick about it. Aaron nodded slowly. "Sorry man, that sucks, but can I say something without sounding like a jerk?" "Sure. You can either stay mad at him forever or you can become the guy who knows this game better than he does." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You know how in some families nobody understands retirement accounts, so they just do whatever the bank guy says. Then one cousin reads a book and suddenly everybody's asking them questions." He shrugged. "You could be that guy for housing, for yourself at least, maybe more." The idea of me being anyone else that guy when it came to money felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake what he said, become the guy who knows this game better than he does. Later that week, Aaron slid a book onto my desk. "This helped me," he said. "It's not get-rich-quick crap, it's just numbers and mindsets, take it or leave it." The book was about basic real estate investing. Not flipping, not TV show drama. Just how mortgages worked, how to analyze a property, what cash flow meant. I took it home and cracked it open, half expecting to be bored. Instead, it lit up the same part of my brain that likes solving project timelines at work. There were formulas and examples. If the rent is X and your expenses are Y, your cash flow is Z. If a property costs this much and you put this much down, here's what your payment might look like. It was dense but not impossible. I started running fake numbers for buildings I saw listed on Zillow just for fun. Fun meaning sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook, scribbling if rent $900 x 4 units equals $3,600. Mortgage. Taxes, maintenance, would it even work? It was like playing real-life Monopoly, but with my anxiety dialed down by the idea that maybe, just maybe, I could someday sit on the other side of the lease. At the same time, I tightened up my own finances. From the podcast and books, I learned about high-yield savings accounts, so I moved my emergency fund to one. I increased my 401k contribution just enough to get the full employer match, which felt like free money falling from the sky. I tracked every dollar I spent for 3 months. It was tedious at first, then weirdly empowering. Patterns emerged. I realized my occasional takeout habit was actually 2 or 3 times a week. I saw how much I'd been paying for subscriptions I barely used. I cut the fluff, not all of it, but enough that, for the first time in my adult life, I was regularly saving more than I was accidentally wasting. Anger at Greg fueled the first few months. Every time I wanted to order food instead of cooking, I'd think, do I want Uber Eats to have this money, or do I want to erase that $1,500 loss? It was petty maybe, but it worked. Over time, though, the motivation shifted. It stopped being about clawing back a specific amount and started feeling like I was building something. A buffer, a sense of control. I made mistakes too. I chased a hot stock tip once and watched a few $100s evaporate over 3 months. I almost signed up for some real estate investing course that turned out to be a glorified seminar funnel. I backed out when I realized the sales page spent more time bragging about the instructor's cars than showing actual numbers. Every misstep hurt, but none of them hurt as much as walking out of that old apartment with photos in my phone and nothing in my account. The real pivot came during a happy hour I almost didn't attend. Our company had just survived a round of layoffs. I'd watched 2 people pack their desks into cardboard boxes that day, their eyes glassy. I made it through, but the relief was shaky. It felt like being missed by a car you didn't see coming. When the email about team bonding at a bar nearby went out, my first instinct was to skip it. Drinks weren't in my budget. My social battery was drained, but Marco, my boss, cornered me at my desk. "You're coming, right?" he said. "You've been killing it on the logistics rollout. Let the company buy you a beer." I went. And I'm glad I did, because that's where I met Sandra properly. Seen her around the office, early 40s, sharp, always in sensible heels, usually in meetings with the founders. I thought she was some kind of consultant. Turned out she was the CFO. Somehow the conversation at our end of the table turned to housing. One of the newer hires was complaining about a landlord who wouldn't fix a broken stove. "Landlords," he groaned. "Necessary evil." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Some are," she said. "Some are just people who read the fine print first." I laughed. My last landlord definitely fell into the first category. Stole my deposit, faked some damage photos, the whole 9 yards. She looked at me in that way some older professionals do when they're deciding whether to tell you something real. "Did you fight it?" she asked. "Sort of," I said. "Drafted a small claims case and then chickened out. I didn't have the emotional or financial bandwidth to go through with it." "Fair," she said. "Most people don't. The system counts on that." There was no judgment in her voice, just observation. "Can I give you a piece of advice?" she added. "Please. If something hits you that hard, don't just decide never again in a vague way. Turn it into a goal with a plan, otherwise it just sits there as resentment." I nodded slowly. "I've been trying, actually, learning about money, real estate, stuff like that." Her face lit up a little. "Good, let me guess, you've discovered the joys of spreadsheets outside of work." I laughed. "Maybe." We ended up talking for half an hour about how she'd started investing in index funds in her 20s, how she bought a small condo in her early 30s, how she'd made both good and terrible decisions along the way. She didn't present herself as a genius, just as someone who'd bothered to learn the rules. At one point, she said, "If you're serious about real estate, start by understanding the numbers cold. Not the TV drama, not the Instagram flexes. The boring stuff. Income, expenses, risk, and keep your day job while you learn." "Any recommendations?" I asked. She rattled off a couple of book titles and a local meetup for small landlords and real estate investors. "You can go just to listen," she added. "You don't have to buy anything, just be in the room." Being in the room with people who owned buildings was a mental stretch. In my head, landlord still looked like Greg, condescending, unreachable. But the idea of being the kind of person who could walk into a building and not feel like a supplicant, that grabbed me. A week later, I went to the meetup. It was held in the back of a pizza place in a room that smelled like cheese and ambition. Maybe 20 people were there. A few older guys in polos, a couple of women my age, a pair of 20-something brothers in hoodies who looked like they'd just discovered leverage. I sat in the back, notebook open, heart pounding like I was crashing a private club. The speaker that night was a local investor who owned a mix of single-family homes and small multifamily buildings. He talked about boring things: vacancy rates, maintenance budgets, screening tenants, how to build relationships with plumbers and electricians. He mentioned horror stories of people who'd gone cheap and paid for it later. And then he said something I'll never forget. "If you're going to be in this game, you have to decide what kind of landlord you're going to be. If you treat people like line items, they'll treat you like an enemy. If you treat them like human beings and run your numbers right, you can actually sleep at night." It hit me, I didn't just want to beat Greg at his own game. I wanted to play a different version of it, one where I could look a tenant in the eye and not see a target. On the drive home, I realized what had changed in me. At the beginning, my fantasy revenge story had been simple: get my deposit back, maybe with interest, and watch Greg squirm. But now my imagination was doing something else. quietly sketching a life where I owned a place like that old brick building but ran it the exact opposite way. Every time I drove past my former street, I'd glance at the building and imagine it with new windows, a fixed front door, a lit stairwell. I'd picture tenants getting their emails answered with something other than "read your lease." Anger had been the spark, but what was keeping me going now was a vision of a future where people like Greg didn't get the last word, because there's a difference between getting even and getting ahead. Getting even is a single event, a court case, a shouted argument, a slammed door. It burns hot and fast. Getting ahead is slow. It's spreadsheets at midnight. It's saying no to things you want now so you can say yes to bigger things later. It's learning laws and terms and concepts you once thought weren't for people like you. I made a quiet decision after that meetup, sitting alone in my car in the dark parking lot, hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't just going to be good with money someday. I was going to buy a place, a real physical building, something that meant no one could casually threaten me with "read your lease" ever again. I didn't know how long it would take. Years, probably. I didn't know what would happen at work or in relationships or in the economy. All I knew was this: the next time I shook hands over a lease, I'd be the one sliding it across the table, not to trap someone, but to prove to myself most of all that the kid who once walked away from his own money out of fear and ignorance had become someone entirely different. Someone who didn't just survive the game, someone who learned how to own the board. In part 4, the listing popped up on a random Tuesday night when I should have been sleeping. I was on my couch, laptop balanced on my knees, half-heartedly scrolling through Zillow like I'd started doing a couple nights a week. It had become a habit, my version of window shopping. I'd plug in filters I couldn't yet afford. Multi-family, 2-4 units, price under $500K. Most of what came up was either trashed beyond my skill set or in neighborhoods I wouldn't feel great living in, let alone owning property. That night, I almost closed the tab. I was tired, my eyes dry, and the workday had been long. Then a thumbnail caught my eye: 4-unit brick building, tree-lined street, second floor balcony staring at a maple tree. My heart stuttered. I clicked. There it was, my old building, the one where Greg had lost my deposit and my faith in landlords in one piece. The photos in the listing were taken in the daytime, with a wide-angle lens that made everything look bigger and brighter than I remembered. But I'd know that facade anywhere. The chipped stone steps, the wrought iron railings, the slightly crooked mailbox cluster by the door. 4-unit multifamily in desirable area, the description read. Value add opportunity, long-term tenants, below market rents, motivated seller, motivated seller. I scrolled to the bottom and there it was in tiny text. Listing agent represents seller Greg H. For a second, I thought it had to be a coincidence. Lots of guys in their 50s were named Greg, lots of them owned buildings. But when I zoomed in on one of the interior shots, the hallway, I saw the same cracked baseboard I'd walked past 100 times. The same too narrow strip of carpet, just with a different color. It was my building, it was for sale. And the man who had taken my $1,500 and dared me to sue him now needed something from the world, a buyer. I sat back, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The rational part of my brain started firing first. This is way out of your league, it said. You just started getting your savings in order. You're not an investor, you're a guy with a podcast habit and a notebook full of fake numbers. But another voice, quieter and sharper, cut through. You said you wanted to buy a building someday, it reminded me. You know this one inside out, you know its problems, you know its potential, and if someone is motivated, there's usually a reason. I clicked through the financials. List price not cheap but not insane for 4 units in that area. The current rents were listed and they were, as advertised, below market, way below. I did quick mental math. If you brought them up slowly over time and fixed the obvious stuff, it could work. Could. Not would, not easy, just possible. I barely slept that night. My brain bounced between visions of me standing outside the building with a sold sign and visions of me declaring bankruptcy, drowning in repairs and vacancies and regrets. In the morning, before I could talk myself out of it, I called Aaron. He picked up sounding groggy. Dude, it's 7:15. I know, I said, but I think I just found my old landlord's building for sale. That woke him up. Wait, what? I sent him the listing link, silence while he clicked. No way, he said finally. That's the one, the deposit guy. That's him, it's listed under his name. 4 units, decent area, rents are low, says motivated seller. He whistled softly. Well, karma's got jokes. I'm not saying I'm buying it, I said quickly. I can't stop thinking about it. Okay, he said. Let's treat it like any other deal. Take the emotions off the table for a second. You got your numbers. I have some savings, I said. Enough for maybe a 10-15% down payment if the price came down. My credit's better now. I've been running scenarios on other properties and, he pushed. And if I got it for less than the list and the rents came up over time and nothing huge was hiding in the walls and I didn't lose my job, it could be cash flow neutral or slightly positive. Neutral is fine for a first multifamily, he said. The tenants paying the mortgage while you build equity is the win, but you'll need reserves, roofs, boilers, all that fun stuff. I thought of those frozen radiators, the half-assed ceiling repairs, the way the front door stuck. Yeah, I said, I know this building has skeletons, literally, probably. Here's what you do, he said. Call the listing agent, ask basic questions, don't lead with any history, just be a prospective buyer. Get the rent roll, expense history, any recent work. Then we'll crunch real numbers. If it still looks viable, you talk to a lender. You've been at your job a while now, right? 2.5 years, I said. Better salary than before, less debt. Then you at least see what they'd approve you for, he said. No harm in asking. Worst case, you learn something. Best case, he trailed off. Best case, I finished. I buy my old landlord's building out from under him. There was a beat, then he chuckled. Now that's a story. I called the listing agent on my lunch break. She was brisk but not unfriendly. Yes, it's still available, she said. We've had some interest but nothing under contract yet. Seller is looking to move it sooner rather than later. Any particular reason, I asked, trying to sound casual. Well, he's got some other obligations, she said, looking to simplify his portfolio, but the building's solid long-term tenants, upside on rents. Any major repairs recently? I asked. Roof, boiler, plumbing. There was a pause, the kind that says I'm deciding how honest to be. Roof is about 15 years old, she said. Boiler's older, recently serviced though, some plumbing updates in the last few years. I can email you the seller's disclosures. Translation, you'll want an inspector who isn't asleep. I thanked her and gave her my email. When the documents came through, I printed them and spread them out on my kitchen table like a crime scene. Income, 4 units, all under rented. Expenses, suspiciously low maintenance line item because of course Greg wasn't fixing anything unless it was on fire. Debt, no indication the building was in foreclosure or short sale, but the phrase motivated kept echoing. Maybe he was over-leveraged. Maybe he just didn't want to deal with tenants anymore. Maybe the city had finally leaned on him for code violations. I ran the numbers 3 different ways: worst case, likely case, best case. In the worst case, with no rent increases and some immediate repairs, I'd be bleeding money every month. In the best case, if I raised rent slowly and nothing catastrophic broke, I'd be okay. Not rich, not Instagram bragging, just okay. The poetic side of me wanted to say yes right then. The kid in me, the one still smarting from the deposit theft, wanted to buy the place just to evict Greg from my mental real estate. The adult in me knew that was a terrible reason to take on a mortgage bigger than any number I'd seen on a screen with my name attached. So I did what I'd trained myself to do since the old days. I talked to people who knew more than I did. I booked a meeting with a loan officer at a local credit union. I brought my pay stubs, tax returns, a list of my debts, and the building's basic info. She looked everything over, tapping on her calculator. With your current income and credit score, she said, we could look at a conventional loan with 20% down or possibly an owner-occupant loan with a lower down payment if you're willing to live in one of the units. Live in my old building again. The thought was jarring, but also interesting. Owner-occupant would mean better terms, I asked. Typically, she said. Lower interest rate, lower down payment. You'd need to move into one of the units and stay there at least a year. The idea of sleeping under the same roof where I'd once shivered through winters while Greg ignored my texts made my stomach twist. But the math difference between 20% down and, say, 5% was massive, years worth of savings. I'd have to run the exact numbers once you have an accepted offer and an appraisal, she added. But based on your profile, you could qualify assuming the building meets standards. Assuming the building meets standards. With Greg's maintenance history, that was a big if. That night, I talked to my mom about it over FaceTime. She frowned in that way only moms can. I don't like the idea of you taking on a big loan for something that man owned, she said. Feels like bad energy. I get that, I said, but it's brick and pipes and wood. He doesn't own the energy. If I buy it, it becomes whatever I make of it. She sighed. You sound like your grandfather. He always wanted land. Said, they can take your job but not your dirt. Just promise me you're not doing this just to get back at someone. I'm not, I said slowly. At least that's not the only reason. It's also a good deal if the inspections check out, and I've been planning to buy something like this anyway. This just happens to be that building. The building where you learned a hard lesson, she said. Yeah, I said, exactly. She studied my face on the screen. You've changed since then, she said. You think more before you act. You know what you're doing better. If you go for it, go in with open eyes, not with fists clenched. I promised her I would. The offer process was nerve-wracking in a way I hadn't anticipated. I worked with a buyer's agent, someone Aaron recommended who understood multifamily. He advised me on what to offer based on similar sales and the building's condition. We go in a bit under asking, he said. Leave room to negotiate. If the seller's really motivated, he'll counter or accept. When he asked if I knew anything about the building's history, I just smiled thinly. You could say that, I said. I used to live there. His eyebrows shot up. Oh man, that's either very good or very complicated. Probably both, I said. We put in the offer, then I waited. Days felt like weeks. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach did a flip. Finally, my agent called. He countered, he said. He named a number lower than the list but higher than my offer. Honestly, it's not bad, given the area, the upside, and your plans. I think it's fair. I ran the numbers again that night. They weren't perfect. There was no scenario where I'd be swimming in free cash flow right away, but between living in one unit, slowly bringing the others up to market, and setting aside a serious maintenance reserve, it was doable, risky, stretchy, but doable. I thought about the other buildings I'd analyzed. Complete strangers, complete unknowns. This one I knew where the heat struggled. I knew which window frames whistled. I knew that if I owned it, the first things I'd fix would be the front door and the hallway light so no one had to climb the stairs in the dark. The next morning, I told my agent to accept the counter. When the inspection report came back, it was exactly what I expected, a mix of deferred maintenance, aging systems, and recommend monitoring. Nothing catastrophic, everything negotiable. We got a small credit from Greg at closing for boiler work. I felt a fierce private satisfaction signing the addendum, as if I were clawing back a tiny piece of what he'd taken years before. Closing day was strangely quiet, no dramatic confrontation. Greg didn't even show. He signed his side of the paperwork earlier with the title company. It was just me, my agent, the closing attorney, and a stack of documents thicker than my forearm. I read every page. When my hand cramped from signing my name so many times, I flexed my fingers and kept going. Loan documents, deed, disclosures, a wire confirmation showing more money leaving my account in one shot than I'd ever imagined. And then finally the attorney slid a single sheet toward me. "Congratulations," he said. "Once this is recorded, you'll be the owner of property address." I stared at the line where my name was printed under grantee. For a second, the room tunneled, sound dropping away. Owner, not tenant pleading for a deposit, not guy on the wrong side of management's inspection is final. Owner, I signed. When I stepped out of the title office into the sunlight, the air felt different, thinner, sharper. I drove straight to the building, parking across the street like I had the first day I'd gone to see the apartment years ago. It looked the same: brick, maple tree, crooked mailboxes, but everything was different. I walked up the front steps, key in hand, not the flimsy brass key ID once used as a renter, but the new master key the locksmith had cut for me as the legal owner. My hand shook a little as I slid it into the lock. The door, still sticking after all these years, resisted for a second. Then it opened. Part 5, owning the building didn't flip some magic switch where everything turned into a movie montage. It was work. The first few months were all boilers, plumbers, and spreadsheets. I met each of the tenants, explained that I was the new owner, and carefully asked what their experience had been like. They were cautious at first, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. When I told them I lived in Unit 2B now, their faces softened. "You actually live here?" the woman in 1A asked, surprised. "Yeah," I said, "which means if the heat goes out, I'm freezing too." She laughed. It was a simple line, but it broke the ice. I fixed the hallway light the first week. I got the front door planed so it opened smoothly. I set up an email address just for maintenance and actually replied to it. It felt good, like I was undoing a tiny bit of the neglect I'd lived through. And every month when the rent checks hit my account and the mortgage auto drafted out, I felt the strange, solid satisfaction of something slowly, quietly building. For a while that was enough. I didn't think about Greg much. He was a name on old documents, nothing more. Then, about 6 months after closing, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line: parking spot availability. The email was from an address I didn't recognize at first. Then I saw the name in the signature: Greg H., Property Management. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, same floor plan as my old unit, now mine, eating leftover pasta. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I opened the email. "Hi, I manage a property a few blocks away on nearby street. My tenant has informed me that the previous owner of your building allowed them to rent a parking space in your back lot on a month-to-month basis. We'd like to continue this arrangement if possible. Please let me know your rate and terms. Regards, Greg." I read it twice, then a third time. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so surreal. Greg, who once told me management's inspection is final, who'd kept my deposit without blinking, was now politely asking if he could keep access to something I controlled. I walked to the back window and looked out over the small gravel lot behind the building. There were 4 spaces striped there, just wide enough for sedans, and a narrow alley that led out to the street. I hadn't even known someone from another property had been renting there. It hadn't come up during closing. I checked my files. In the folder of documents from the sale, there it was in the fine print. Informal agreement with adjacent property to allow use of 1 parking space at market rate. New owner may renegotiate or terminate with 30 days notice. Market rate. There was no number attached, just that phrase. Old me would have fired off a snarky reply, or more likely not replied at all, ghosted, hidden. The person I'd become over the last few years did something else. I took a breath, closed the laptop. Went for a walk. As I circled the block, I turned it over in my mind. I could say no outright. No more space, contract terminated. It would be petty but arguably within my rights. I could also gouge him, pick some arbitrary high number and watch him splutter. But that wasn't who I wanted to be as an owner. The karma I believed in didn't require cruelty. It just required balance. By the time I got back upstairs, I had a plan. I sat down and did some actual research, what comparable off-street parking spots in the neighborhood were going for. I averaged a few numbers, added a bit for convenience, and came up with a monthly rate that was on the high side of fair. Then I did one more thing. I calculated what my $1,500 deposit would have been worth if I'd simply invested it in a boring index fund 4 years ago, using the average market return I'd learned from those podcasts. The gain wasn't massive, but it was something. Spread over, say, a 3-year agreement for the parking spot, the extra over bare bones market rate came surprisingly close. It made me smile, not an evil grin, just a quiet, satisfied curve. Then I wrote back, "Hi Greg, thanks for reaching out and for the context. I did see mention of the informal parking arrangement in the sale documents. I'm open to continuing it under a clear written agreement. Current market rate for off-street spots in this area is around XY per month. Given the convenience of this lot, my rate is Y plus small premium per month, month to month, with 30 days written notice from either party to terminate. If that works for you, I can send over a simple agreement for signature. First and last month's payment due at signing. Regards, my name, owner, property address." I hovered over the send button for a second. He had no idea who owner, property address was. The building had been sold through agents and title companies. As far as he knew, I'd vanished into the tenant ether years ago. I considered adding a line, "P.S. I used to rent 2B, you still owe me $1,500, but that would drag the whole thing back into the mud. I didn't want an apology from him. I'd stopped needing that a long time ago. I hit send. He replied later that day. Rate is higher than expected. Previous owner charged less. Can you match prior arrangement? I could picture his tight little smile as he typed it, still trying to anchor the terms the way he'd always done. I answered, "Hi Greg, I understand the previous owner may have charged below market. I'm bringing everything on this property in line with current rates and clear agreements. The rate I quoted is firm and within local norms. Let me know if you'd like to proceed. Best my name." There was a longer gap this time, a full day, too. On the third day, he replied, "We will proceed under your terms. Please send the agreement." I drafted a 1-page contract. Clear start date, clear rate, late fee terms, 30-day termination clause. I read it 3 times, imagining him skimming and thinking standard, the way I had once done with his lease. I added one final line purely for my own sense of narrative. Lessee acknowledges that all prior informal or verbal agreements related to the use of the parking space are superseded by this written agreement. We both signed electronically. The first payment hit my account a couple days later, labeled with his company name. I stared at it on my banking app. The amount wasn't life-changing. It was barely a blip compared to the mortgage payment, but symbolically it was heavy. Every month going forward, a portion of his money would help pay down the building he no longer owned. Every payment at that slightly higher than market rate would, over time, roughly equal what he'd kept from me per the lease. Not stolen, not clawed, just rerouted with interest. A few weeks after that, I saw him in person for the first time since the move out. I was coming back from the grocery store, reusable bags cutting into my fingers, when a familiar SUV pulled into the alley behind the building. Greg climbed out in his usual uniform, collared shirt, fleece vest, phone in hand. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? Tenants blur when you have enough of them. But as we got closer, his eyes squinted. "Hey," he said slowly. "Did you used to live here?" "Yeah," I said. "Unit 2B, we had a fun conversation about my security deposit, remember?" Color rose in his face, then drained. He laughed once, the sound brittle. "Ah, right, that was some time ago," he said. "You're the new owner?" "That's right." I shifted the grocery bags. "We closed a few months back." He glanced at the building, then back at me. Something in his posture had changed. The slight forward lean of someone used to looming had flattened. He was technically on my property. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "looks like you've done well for yourself." "I've done a lot of reading," I said, "and I answer emails now." He gave a tight smile. Good, tenants like that." We stood there in the alley for a beat, the weight of unsaid things hanging between us. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask him to. What could he say? "Sorry I stole your money, nice building you bought?" Instead, he gestured vaguely toward the back lot. "My guy still parking back there." "As long as the payment's clear," I said. "The agreement's pretty clear." He nodded. Right, good doing business with you." He got back in his SUV and drove off. I watched him go, waiting for some huge rush of vindication, for the movie moment where triumphant music kicks in and the camera pans to my satisfied face. What I felt instead was small, in a good way. He wasn't a supervillain, just a man who'd played a rigged game for long enough he thought the rules didn't apply to him. The universe hadn't struck him down. There was no fiery crash. He was still out there managing other places, probably still cutting corners. But now every month a slice of his operation depended on my signature. The power dynamic had flipped. He used to decide whether I got my money back. Now I decided whether he got to keep cheap parking for his tenant or whether I'd give the space to someone else for the same rate without a second thought. I walked upstairs, put the groceries away, and sat for a second at my tiny kitchen table. The same kind of table where I'd once stared at a zeroed-out account and an email telling me my deposit was gone. My phone buzzed with a notification. Deposit received, Greg's company name parking. I smiled, not out of spite, but out of something closer to gratitude, not for him. For the version of me who decided on a balcony years ago that he would never be in that powerless position again and had actually done the boring, unglamorous work to make that true. Karma, I realized, isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's just a quiet OC transfer once a month from the guy who once told you to read your lease to the guy who owns the building. Part 6. There's a joke among my friends now that I'm the landlord who hates landlords. It's not entirely fair, but I get where it comes from. Most people only meet landlords when something's broken or when money's on the line. They don't see the Saturday afternoons you spend in a basement tracing pipes, or the late nights reviewing leases line by line so you don't accidentally screw someone over or yourself. If you told the version of me who walked out of that old apartment broke and humiliated that one day I'd be on the other side of the lease for that exact same building, I would have laughed in your face, or cried, maybe both. But that's the funny thing about karma. From the outside it looks like a neat, satisfying punchline. Guy loses his deposit, later buys the building, makes landlord pay. It sounds like a movie pitch. Living it felt very different. What actually mattered wasn't the poetic symmetry. It was Greg having to email me for parking, or the slightly higher rate I charged him that quietly mirrored the money he took from me years earlier. What mattered was everything in between. It was the night I looked at my bank account and decided I was tired of not understanding how money worked. The mornings I spent listening to podcasts instead of zoning out in traffic. The evenings I spent with spreadsheets instead of streaming shows. The questions I forced myself to ask, even when I felt dumb. The books I read, the meetups I went to, the conversations with people like Aaron and Sandra who treated me like I was capable of more than just paying rent on time. It was learning that read your lease doesn't just apply when someone wants to weaponize it against you. It's also what you do when you're protecting yourself and the people who live in your buildings. It was realizing that long-term thinking isn't some personality trait you're born with. It's a muscle you build, one decision at a time, choosing to learn a term instead of ignoring it, choosing to save $50 instead of spending it, choosing to walk into a room full of people who own things you've only ever borrowed and say, I don't know much yet, but I'm here to learn. And yeah, it was about self-respect. For a long time, I thought self-respect would come from finally showing Greg. Dragging him to court, forcing him to admit he was wrong, getting a judge to say on the record that he owed me money. But when I saw him in that alley standing on my property, carefully polite because he needed something from me, I realized I didn't need any of that. I didn't need him to say he was wrong. I knew he was. I didn't need a judge to validate my anger. My bank account and my title deed did that just fine. The real revenge wasn't him paying for a parking spot. It was the fact that I had turned one of the lowest points of my adult life into a catalyst. Into a promise. I will learn. I will remember. I will not let this happen again. And then I'd actually kept that promise. That's what I think about when I sit down once a month to do the books for the building. I open my accounting software, see the rent payments from my tenants, people whose emails I answer, whose heat I fix, whose deposits I document carefully and return when they move out if they've held up their end. Then I see the line from Greg's company, a small amount compared to the rest, but still there. Regular, predictable. I categorize it like any other income, not special, not glowing. Just another line in a ledger that slowly is tilting in my favor. Sometimes, late at night when the building is quiet and the radiators hum just right, I'll walk down the hallway and stand at the top of the stairs where I once trudged up with boxes as a nervous renter. The walls are freshly painted now. The light is on. I run my hand along the banister and think about the kid who was too scared to take a day off work and fight for $1,500 in small claims. I don't hate him. He did the best he could with what he knew. But I'm not him anymore. And that, more than the money or the irony or the clean paperwork victory, is the part that feels like karma. Not lightning, not a cosmic slap. Just the quiet, steady transformation into someone who doesn't get pushed around because he knows where the lines are and he knows how to write them himself. So when people ask why I tell this story on a channel called Karma's Letterbox, this is why. Sometimes karma isn't the universe punishing the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's the universe giving you a mirror and a stack of lessons and saying, okay, what are you going to do with this? My answer turned out to be pretty simple. He kept my $3K deposit. Now I cash his rent check every month.